The first death wasn't cardiac arrest. It was digital. I saw it happen in real time from my glass-walled cubicle at Viridian Tech, where I, Amara Silva, spent my days packaging artificial intelligence into palatable marketing campaigns. On my secondary monitor, a Slack channel buzzed about Q3 projections. On my phone, glowing faintly in my lap, the family group chat, dubbed The Nest by my mother in a moment of profound irony, erupted with a different kind of data stream. The initial message was a tremor. "Hi everyone, I'm so sorry to ask. The price of my Corlinor has gone up again. The pharmacy says I'm short $185 for this month. My pension doesn't come until the 1st. If anyone could help, I'll pay you back immediately. Love, Mom." It was 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was simultaneously listening to a 22-year-old product manager named Chad explain how blockchain could revolutionize our content calendar. My grandmother's words, typed with the careful, uncertain spacing of arthritic thumbs, cut through Chad's jargon like a scalpel. Lillian Hayes, 79 years young, a woman who had spent a lifetime measuring out care in teaspoons, antibiotics as a nurse, soup for sick neighbors, patience for granddaughters with skinned knees. Now she was measuring the distance between her need and her children's compassion. $185, the cost of a nice dinner out, a Bluetooth speaker, a single session with my mother's life coach. The response was not immediate. The silence in the chat was its own answer, a 3-minute void where you could almost hear the calculations clicking behind screens across Austin and Dallas. The weighing of inconvenience against obligation, the mental shuffling of justifications. My mother, Celeste, broke the silence. Her words appeared, perfectly punctuated, a corporate email masquerading as filial concern. "Mother, you have to be more proactive with the insurance company. You can't just accept the first price. Be a squeaky wheel. Have you looked into the manufacturer's coupon program? I sent you the link for that last year." Advice. The currency of the privileged. It costs nothing to give and absolves the giver of all responsibility. I could picture her, sitting in her minimalist home office in Westlake, sipping alkaline water, convinced she'd discharged her duty by forwarding a URL. Then, my Uncle Robert, forever the pragmatic accountant, "Lil, Janet at the clinic says the generic ivermectin is practically identical and 80% cheaper. You're letting them upsell you. You need to be smarter about this." Be smarter. The condescension was a physical blow. This was a woman who had balanced medical ledgers for a county hospital, who had stretched a nurse's salary to put 3 kids through college. Be smarter. But it was my Aunt Vanessa's reply that stopped to be air in my lungs. The baby of the family, perpetually perched on the knife edge of a spiritual awakening she'd bought at a retreat in Sedona. "Mom, I hear your fear, but I have to speak my truth. At this stage of the journey, maybe we need to have a courageous conversation about quality of life versus mere quantity. The body is a temple, and flooding it with synthetic chemicals, it's an energetic blockage. Is extending the physical vessel worth compromising the soul's peace?" I stared at the screen. Quality of life versus quantity. She wasn't suggesting a cheaper drug. She was suggesting my grandmother's life was no longer worth the cost of preservation. She had philosophized her mother into a budgetary line item. A white-hot fury, clean and sharp, replaced my initial shock. My fingers itched to type a scorching rebuttal, to eviscerate them with their own words. But a colder, more strategic instinct held me back. If I engaged, they would swarm me. They'd label me emotional, dramatic, enmeshed. They'd turn my defense of Lillian into a personal flaw. I had seen the pattern my whole life. So I did nothing in the chat. I let the silence after Vanessa's comment stretch, a chasm into which Lillian's dignity was falling. Then, the final, unforgivable act. A new message popped up. It was from my mother, but it wasn't text. It was a screenshot. It showed her iPhone contacts list. Next to the entry labeled Mom, a gray icon of a circle with a line through it, the block symbol. Her caption read, "Setting necessary boundaries for my own mental health. The constant financial guilt tripping is a form of emotional toxicity. I'm instituting a 48-hour communication pause. I suggest you all consider doing the same. She needs to learn self-sufficiency." Self-sufficiency at 79 with a failing heart? The chat exploded with supportive emojis. Thumbs up from Robert, a heart from Vanessa. My cousin Jason wrote, "Preach, Aunt Celeste, boundaries are everything." I closed my eyes. The office sounds, the clack of keyboards, the hum of the HVAC, Chad's droning voice, receded into a dull roar. I saw Lillian, alone in her quiet, dim house in San Marcos, waiting for a lifeline that had not only been withheld, but actively severed. She would be checking her phone, watching for the 3 dancing dots that meant someone was typing a reply. She would see nothing, just the void she'd been relegated to. "Amara, your thoughts on the blockchain integration?" Chad was looking at me. The entire budget meeting was looking at me. I realized I was standing. "I have to go," I said, my voice alien to my own ears. "A family emergency." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the conference room, through the trendy open-plan office with its living walls and ping-pong table, and into the sterile, tiled sanctuary of the women's restroom. I locked myself in a stall, pressed my forehead against the cool metal door, and finally let the tears come. Silent, furious sobs that shook my shoulders. This wasn't just about $185. This was a referendum on Lillian's worth, and her own children had voted unanimously. Not enough. When the storm passed, leaving me hollowed out and clear-eyed, I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. The numbers were a grim, familiar sight. Available balance, $512.48. Rent, due 5 days, $1,450. Pending freelance invoice, $1,200. Already 8 days late. I was dangling over a financial cliff by my fingernails. That $512 was for groceries, gas, the utility bill that was already showing up as past due. To touch it was to trigger a cascade of consequences I couldn't afford. I opened my texts and found my thread with Lillian. Her last message to me from 2 days ago was a picture of a bright red cardinal perched on her bird feeder. "My morning visitor. He reminds me of you, sweet girl, bold and beautiful." My heart cracked. I opened the pharmacy app. I had her details saved from the last time I'd picked up a prescription for her after a minor surgery. I found the Corlinor. I didn't select the 30-day supply. I selected 90 days. If I was going to jump off this cliff, I'd make sure she had a long, soft landing. Total, $472.38. My thumb hovered over the confirm purchase button. A montage of consequences flashed. Eviction notices, phone calls from collectors, the humiliating walk to work in the blistering Texas heat because I couldn't afford gas. The fear was a living thing, coiling in my gut. Then I saw Vanessa's words again. Quality versus quantity. I saw my mother block icon. My thumb came down. The app processed the payment. A cheerful green checkmark appeared. Order confirmed. Delivery by 8 p.m. today. My available balance updated. $40.10. I was now officially broke. The freelance check was a phantom. I was one unexpected copay, one flat tire, one broken phone screen away from ruin. A strange calm settled over me. The fear was still there, but it was background noise. In the foreground was a crystalline, terrifying clarity. I had drawn a line in the sand with my last dollar. On one side stood my family and their brutal transactional logic. On the other stood me and Lillian. I texted her, careful to keep my voice light, to erase any trace of my sacrifice. "Nana, don't you dare cut those pills in half. A friend at work had to manufacture a coupon she couldn't use. It was about to expire. I just ordered a 3-month supply to your door. Should be there tonight. Please take the full dose. I'm not taking no for an answer. Love you." The 3 dots appeared immediately. "Oh, my Amara, you angel. You shouldn't have. I feel terrible. I'll pay you back the very second my check clears. I promise. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd manage," I lied, "but you don't have to. That's what I'm here for." I left the bathroom stall. My reflection in the mirror was pale, with red-rimmed eyes, but my jaw was set. I had $40 to my name and a grandmother who needed me. It was the simplest, most terrifying math of my life. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in scarcity. I became a ghost in my own life. I ignored texts from friends suggesting happy hour. I told my boyfriend, Leo, I was on a digital detox to explain my radio silence. The shame of my near poverty was a thicker wall than any lie. I walked the 3.2 miles to and from work in the oppressive Austin humidity, my good shoes developing blisters. I ate rice and beans from a giant bag I'd bought at a bulk store, seasoned with nothing but salt and a simmering rage. Every other evening I drove to San Marcos. Lillian's small ranch-style house with its peeling paint and stubbornly cheerful garden became my sanctuary. We didn't talk about the money. We talked about her rose bushes, which were under attack by aphids. We talked about the novel she was rereading. We talked about my work, and I spun sunny, fictional tales of exciting projects, editing out the soul-crushing reality of Chad and his blockchain. I watched her carefully. The medicine was working. The grayish pallor that had haunted her cheeks was receding. But something else was fading too. The light of hope that her immediate family might reappear. Her phone sat silent on the coffee table. No calls from Celeste checking in. No texts from Vanessa about energy flows. No emails from Robert with more financial tips. The neglect was a passive, smothering thing. They hadn't just refused a request, they had withdrawn their presence entirely. It was an unspoken agreement. Lillian was too much trouble. Meanwhile, the nest was buzzing. The topic had moved on with chilling speed. They were now deep in planning a joint 40th birthday blowout for my cousins, Jason and Samantha. The thread was hundreds of messages long, debating venues in Napa, debating caterers, debating the merits of a live band versus a DJ. It was a festival of excess, a monument to their shared, curated lives. Lillian's name was never mentioned. It was as if the $185 plea had been a minor system glitch, now patched and forgotten. I started documenting everything. It began as a gut instinct, the same instinct that made me good at my job. You track data, you build a case. I took screenshots of Vanessa's quality versus quantity text, of my mother's boundary posting screenshot, of Robert's generic drug advice. I saved them in a secure, encrypted folder I named The Receipts. One night, helping Lillian sort through a box of old photos, I found a manila envelope tucked beneath the albums. It was labeled in her elegant cursive, "For Amara." Inside were records, not sentimental ones, but financial ones. Canceled checks. A check for $5,000 to University of Texas tuition, Celeste Hayes, dated 1985. A check for $3,200 to Robert Hayes, security deposit. A promissory note signed by Vanessa for $8,000 for yoga studio startup capital. There were dozens. Payments for car repairs, down payments on apartments, medical bills for my cousins when they were children. Lillian had been the family's silent, steadfast bank for decades. She had never asked for a repayment. The love was in the giving. I held the brittle paper, feeling the weight of history. She had funded their dreams, their security, their very lives. And in return for a $185 request to keep her own heart beating, she had been blocked, philosophized into unworthiness, and ghosted. "Why did you keep these, Nana?" I asked, my voice thick. She was quiet for a long moment, gazing at a photo of her 3 children, smiling on her porch steps. "I suppose," she said softly, part of me always knew a day might come when I'd need to remember who I was to them and who they chose to be to me. It was then I saw it, not just sadness in her eyes, but a dawning, steely resolve, the kind that forms in the deepest quiet after all the tears have been shed. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday. I was at her house, attempting to fix a leaky faucet, covered in grime and frustration, when my phone buzzed. It was a calendar alert I'd forgotten. Family dinner, Celeste's, 7 p.m. I'd been uninvited? No, worse. I'd been overlooked. The planning had happened in a different chat, one I wasn't in. I only knew because a mutual friend posted a picture on Instagram later that night. There they all were, around my mother's farmhouse table, laughing, passing platters of food. Celeste, Robert, Vanessa, their spouses, my cousins. A perfect tableau of familial warmth. The caption? So grateful for my tribe. Family is everything. #blessed. I showed the picture to Lillian. She didn't cry, she just nodded slowly, as if confirming a dark hypothesis. She walked to her old roll-top desk, unlocked it with a small key from her necklace, and pulled out a simple leather wallet. From behind a photo of me at my college graduation, she slid out a brightly colored slip of paper. I bought this the day Vanessa canceled on me to get a hot stone massage, she said, her voice eerily calm. I was so angry, so unseen. I spent $20 I couldn't really spare, forgot all about it. It was a Powerball ticket from a drawing 3 months ago. A cold electric jolt shot through me. Nana! She checked the numbers last week, she whispered, her eyes locking onto mine. They were no longer the soft, watery eyes of a frail grandmother. They were the sharp, assessing eyes of the head nurse who had run a chaotic ER for 30 years. After the incident with the medicine, I needed a distraction, so I checked. She didn't need to say it. The truth was in the seismic shift in her bearing, in the new, unshakable gravity that filled the room. "How much?" I breathed, the words barely audible. She told me. The number, $365 million, didn't compute. It was science fiction. It was a typo from the universe. My mind short-circuited, trying to wrap itself around a sum greater than the GDP of a small nation. I stumbled to a chair. You've known for a week? Why didn't you tell me? Why are we sitting here eating canned soup? She sat across from me, taking my grimy hands in her clean, dry ones. Because the money isn't the point yet, Amara. The test is the point. What test? The test they've been administering to me for years. The test of my worth. I just decided to turn it back on them. Her gaze was unwavering. The day after the lawyer confirmed the money was irrevocably mine, I called your mother. I told her the electric bill was higher than expected, and I was short $50. Could she please help me just this once? I could picture it, my mother's sigh of exasperation, the subtle eye roll. And? She said, "Mother, we've talked about this. You have to live within your means. I can't keep doing this. It's emotionally draining. Ask Amara if she can pick up an extra shift." Then she hung up. The cruelty of it, layered atop the monumental lie of Lillian's new reality, was staggering. She had been sitting on a king's ransom, conducting a final, devastating experiment on her children's hearts, and they had failed spectacularly. I had $365 million in a trust, and my daughter, who I put through law school, wouldn't give me $50 to keep the lights on. Robert wouldn't. Vanessa was probably busy aligning her chakras. The dam broke then. Not hysterical sobs, but a deep, gut-wrenching weeping of a lifetime of love offered and spurned. I held her as she shook, this tiny, mighty woman who had been a pillar for everyone and now was treated as crumbling drywall. When she finally stilled, she looked up, wiped her face, and her expression hardened into something formidable. They think I'm a problem to be managed, a burden to be balanced. They've shown me exactly what my love, my life, is worth to them. She squeezed my hands. And you, my darling, desperate and brave and broke, showed me what it's worth to you. You passed the only test that matters. What do we do now? I asked, the world tilting on its axis. A slow, determined smile touched her lips. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a general surveying a battlefield. Now, she said, we go to war, and we hire the best general money can buy. Mr. Alistair Thorne's offices occupied the top 3 floors of a shimmering glass tower in Houston, a monument to money so vast it needed its own weather system. The air inside smelled of lemongrass, anxiety, and unimaginable wealth. Lillian, in her simple blue dress and pearls, looked profoundly out of place, and yet, as she strode across the silent marble lobby, completely in command. Thorne himself was a man in his late 60s with a head of silver hair so perfect it looked helmeted. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my car and had the calm, dispassionate eyes of a surgeon or a sniper. He specialized in legacy asset management and familial transition, which I learned was a polite term for protecting the ultra-wealthy from their greedy relatives. He did not patronize Lillian. He listened. For 2 hours, she laid out the case. Not the financial case of the lottery win, but the human case. She showed him the screenshots from my receipts folder. She showed him the canceled checks from her archive. She played him a voice message from Vanessa, left just yesterday, chirping about a new crystal healing workshop and not once asking how she was feeling. Thorne listened, his fingers steepled. When she finished, he nodded once. Mrs. Hayes, you are not the first client to sit in that chair with a story of familial betrayal. You are, however, one of the clearest-eyed. You understand this is not a financial transaction. It is a psychological and legal siege. He laid out the battlefield. The enemy, he explained, would have 3 primary weapons. 1. Claims of undue influence. They would argue Lillian was not in her right mind, that I, the attentive granddaughter, had manipulated her. 2. Claims of testamentary capacity. They would argue she was too old, too sick, too confused to understand the documents she was signing. 3. The court of public opinion. They would smear us, paint Lillian as a senile old woman and me as a gold-digging opportunist, hoping public pressure would force a settlement. Therefore, Thorne said, turning his laser focus to me, our strategy is threefold: fortification, documentation, and annihilation. Fortification meant building legal structures so rock-solid they would break any tool used against them. He proposed an immediate, irrevocable trust in my name, a poison pill trust with a fierce no-contest clause. If anyone challenged it, they'd be automatically disinherited from even the symbolic dollar he suspected Lillian would want to leave them. He also drafted an ironclad medical power of attorney and living will, naming me and his firm as sole decision-makers, explicitly excluding Celeste, Robert, and Vanessa. Documentation meant proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Lillian was of sound mind and had been systematically neglected. He dispatched a team of discreet private investigators to digitally archive every social media post, every public record. He arranged for not 1, but 3 independent geriatric psychiatrists chosen from prestigious institutions with no ties to Texas to evaluate Lillian. He also instructed us to record, legally, in our one-party consent state, every future interaction with the family. Annihilation was the response plan. If they attacked, we would not defend. We would counterattack with overwhelming, embarrassing force. We would release the screenshots. We would file countersuits for defamation and emotional distress. We would make the cost of fighting us so prohibitively high, financially and socially, that surrender would be their only option. "We must also consider your own protection, Miss Silva," Thorne said, his eyes narrowing. "You will be painted as the villain. Your career, your relationships, your reputation will be targeted. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of my $40 bank balance. I thought of Lillian's face when she read Vanessa's text. I thought of the canceled checks, the ledger of a lifetime of unreciprocated love. "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't shake. Lillian reached over and took my hand. "Then let's begin." The next 72 hours were a blur of signatures, notaries, and quiet, ruthless efficiency. Thorne's team was a well-oiled machine. The Amara Silva Irrevocable Trust was established, its initial funding a sum that made my knees weak. The Lillian Hayes Foundation was incorporated, its mission statement, to provide emergency support for seniors facing medical financial neglect, a silent, screaming rebuke to her children. The psychiatrists came to the rented penthouse Thorne had secured for us in Houston. They were brisk, professional, and thorough. They asked Lillian about current events, her medical history, her finances. They gave her cognitive tests. At the end, all three produced identical reports. Lillian Hayes displays exceptional cognitive clarity, executive function, and testamentary capacity. There is no evidence of undue influence or diminished mental faculty. We had our shield. It was Thorne who suggested the next crucial move: disappearance. "The Lottery Commission will announce the winner's name and city in 10 days, he said. "It is a public record. When that happens, your family will connect the dots. The vultures will circle. I recommend you be unavailable." "Where would we go?" Lillian asked, a spark of adventure in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "Anywhere you like. Somewhere without extradition treaties with the family drama," Thorne said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "My assistant has a list of discreet, fully staffed properties from the Alps to Bora Bora. I suggest you leave no forwarding address. Let them marinate in their ignorance and their growing panic." And so, we vanished. We chose a villa on the Amalfi Coast, a terracotta-tiled haven clinging to a cliffside overlooking a Tyrrhenian sea so blue it hurt to look at. It was a different universe. The air smelled of lemon blossoms and salt, not antiseptic and despair. For the first few days, we did nothing but exist. Lillian slept 10 hours a night. I read novels for pleasure, not for market analysis. We ate ripe peaches and creamy burrata, not rice and beans. The silence was a healing balm, but it wasn't complete. Our phones, with new numbers known only to Thorne and a few key staff, remained a tether to the coming storm. The first squall hit via social media. I made a mistake. On our 5th day, watching the sun dissolve into a liquid gold horizon, I felt a pang of pure, unadulterated happiness. I took a selfie, the stunning vista behind me, and posted it to Instagram with a simple caption: "Peace." I didn't tag the location, I didn't show the villa, but the internet is a detective. Within an hour, a travel influencer I followed had commented, "Wait, is that the terrace at Villa de Sogni? Jealous." The digital breadcrumb was dropped. The nest, which I hadn't checked in weeks, presumably exploded. I didn't need to see it. My personal phone, which I'd left powered off in a safe in Austin, would be ringing nonstop. The first direct messages to my new secret number began to trickle in. From Celeste: "Amara, where are you? Is your grandmother with you? We are very concerned. This is irresponsible. Call me immediately." From Robert: "Your mother is worried sick. What's going on?" From Vanessa: "Sweetie, the energy around this is very chaotic. Are you and Grandma safe? I'm sensing a lot of fear." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Weeks of radio silence, and now they were worried sick? They weren't worried about Lillian's health. They were worried about their loss of control. Then, the lottery news broke locally. A brief article in the Austin American-Statesman. Hayes County resident claims record Powerball jackpot. No name yet, but the location was enough. The vultures smelled blood in the water. The messages turned frantic, then accusatory. Celeste. The news says the winner is from San Marcos. Amara. Did she win? Answer me. This is a family matter. Vanessa. Zoe told me she saw a black car at Mom's house weeks ago with a Houston plate. What have you done? Jason, my cousin. Cuz, holy shit, did Grandma win the lottery? That's wild. Hey, I've got this can't-miss crypto play. I showed them all to Lillian. We read them aloud on the terrace with a plate of biscotti between us, like theater critics reviewing a bad play. The fear, the greed, the naked opportunism, it was all there, laid bare. They're not even good at it, Lillian said, sipping her espresso. No finesse. Robert should at least have sent a spreadsheet. They're panicking, I said. They know they've lost the narrative. Good, she replied. Let them panic. Let them wonder. Let them feel for a few weeks what it's like to be in the dark, to be an afterthought. Thorne called. The formal announcement is tomorrow. Your family will have confirmation. I've already fielded 3 calls from reporters sniffing around. It's time. Are you ready to face the music? Lillian looked out at the sea, her profile regal against the endless blue. She said no, but I'm ready to conduct the orchestra. We did not return to San Marcos. We returned to Houston, to the neutral, intimidating territory of Thorne's domain. He had arranged for a private conference room that felt more like an operating theater. The walls were soundproofed, the long, polished table reflected the cold, recessed lighting. 2 large security personnel, who looked like they were carved from granite, stood by the door. We arrived first. Lillian wore a tailored navy suit, a new purchase from Milan. She looked like a diplomat or a queen. I wore simple black. We were the calm before the storm. They arrived as a pack, Celeste leading the charge, her face a masterpiece of performed concern and underlying fury. Robert, red-faced and blustering. Vanessa, trying for an aura of zen disappointment, but failing, her eyes darting around the expensive room, calculating. My cousins, Jason and Samantha, looking simultaneously bored and entitled. The moment they saw Thorne and his associates, their performative concern stiffened into wariness. Mother, Celeste began, rushing forward, arms outstretched for a hug Lillian did not offer. Thank God you're safe. We've been out of our minds. What is this place? Who are these people? Sit down, Celeste, Lillian said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried a lifetime of deferred authority. It brooked no argument. They sat, uneasily, on the opposite side of the vast table. The distance between us was more than physical. It was a canyon carved by years of neglect, now filled with $365 million of silent accusation. Celeste tried to regain control. We've been so worried. When we saw the news, we knew you couldn't handle this alone. We've put together a proposal, a family board, to manage the funds responsibly, to protect you from... From what, Celeste? Lillian interrupted. From people who want my money? She let the question hang, her gaze sweeping over each of them. Like the people who told me to cut my heart pills in half, or to call a generic drug company, or to consider whether my quantity of life was worth the cost. Vanessa had the decency to flush. Robert scowled. That's not fair, Lil. We were giving tough love, trying to make you self-sufficient. Self-sufficient, Lillian repeated. She nodded to me. I tapped my laptop. On the large screen at the end of the room, Vanessa's text appeared, magnified to monstrous size. Quality of life versus mere quantity. A collective intake of breath. Then the screenshot of Celeste's blocked contact. Then Robert's generic drug advice. Then a scan of one of the canceled checks, the $8,000 for Vanessa's yoga studio. Self-sufficiency. Lillian said quietly. "A concept you were all happy to forgo when it was my signature on the check." She leaned forward. "You had one job, one, to care for the woman who gave you everything. And when I asked for the smallest fraction of that care in return, you not only refused, you philosophized, you blocked, you judged. You showed me in high-definition clarity exactly what my love was worth to you." "Mom, you're twisting this," Celeste cried, real tears now, tears of frustration, of a prize slipping away. "We love you. This is about protecting you from gold diggers and scams." Her eyes cut to me, venomous. "Enough." Thorne's voice cut through the room like a guillotine. "Mrs. Hayes's capacity has been evaluated and confirmed by 3 independent experts. Her estate planning is complete and legally unassailable. You are not here to negotiate. You are here to be informed." He placed 5 plain white envelopes on the table and slid them across the polished surface. "Your inheritance." The scramble was undignified, paper ripped. Celeste stared at the check, her face draining of all color. $1? $1, Lillian confirmed. "The estimated value of the care you provided this past year. It's generous, considering." Robert threw his check on the table. "This is an insult. We're your blood." "Blood is biology," Lillian said, echoing the words she'd once said to me. "Family is behavior. You failed the behavioral exam." Vanessa was hyperventilating. You can't give it all to her. She's manipulated you. She's after your money." Before I could speak, Thorne did. "Miss Hayes, you are accusing my client, Miss Silva, of felony undue influence and elder abuse. Those are actionable defamatory statements. My firm is recording this meeting. Would you like to repeat your allegation on the record for our forthcoming slander lawsuit?" Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping on land. Jason, ever the opportunist, saw a last angle. "Grandma, come on, this is crazy. Think about your legacy, your name, the Hayes name. You're just going to give it all to strangers?" Lillian smiled then, a true radiant smile that held no warmth for them. "My legacy," she said, "is the Lillian Hayes Foundation. $250 million, dedicated to making sure no other grandmother has to choose between her medicine and her dignity. Every time it cuts a check, it will bear my name. And attached to every grant letter," she added, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "will be a note explaining that this gift was made possible by the profound lesson my children taught me about the price of neglect." It was the final, masterful blow. They weren't just being cut off, they were being immortalized as the cautionary tale that funded a crusade against their own behavior. Their cruelty was being institutionalized, turned into a force of good that would forever mock them. Celeste collapsed into sobs, the raw, ugly cries of a tantrum-throwing child who has lost the biggest toy of all. Robert stood, knocking his chair over, and stormed out, followed quickly by a shell-shocked Vanessa. Jason muttered "unbelievable" and slunk after them. Only Samantha lingered for a second, looking at Lillian with something that might have been shame, before hurrying out. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence they left was absolute, and then it was filled by a long, shuddering sigh from Lillian. All the strength seemed to leach out of her. She sagged in her chair. I was at her side in an instant. "Nana?" She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm all right, darling, just tired. It's a wearying thing to finally stop hoping." "It's over," I said. "It is," she agreed. She looked around the cold, empty room, then at me. And for the first time in a very long time, it feels like a beginning. That was a year ago. The Lillian Hayes Foundation is now a recognized force. It is paid for medication, for home health aides, for legal representation for seniors being financially exploited by their families. Its board is fierce and compassionate. Lillian attends every monthly meeting via video call, her insight sharp, her generosity boundless. My family did try to fight. They gave a tearful, carefully coached interview to a tabloid. Thorne, as promised, didn't defend. He counterattacked. He released a single redacted page from one of the $1 letters to a reputable newspaper. The court of public opinion turned against them with a fury that shocked even me. They were branded the heartless heirs in online forums. Celeste's law firm faced mild embarrassment. Vanessa's yoga studio saw a brief boycott. They retreated, chastened and bitter, into private fury. I never accessed the full trust. I live on the generous, sensible stipend it provides. I quit my job at Veridian and now run strategic communications for the foundation. I found a love for work that means something. Leo, to his credit, stood by me through the media storm. He saw the receipts, met Lillian, and understood. We're planning a small wedding in the gardens of our new home, a bright, airy house near the coast that Lillian helped me kick out. Lillian lives in a beautiful, accessible casita on the property. She has a gardener, a gentle, retired man named Miguel who adores her, and a book club that meets weekly. Her health is stable. Her laugh is frequent. The light in her eyes is back. Not the dim hope of before, but the bright, clear light of a woman who knows her own worth and has surrounded herself with people who reflect it back to her. One evening last week, we were sitting on the porch, watching the pelicans dive. The sunset painted the sky in shades of peach and lavender. "Do you ever wonder," I asked her, "what would have happened if one of them had just sent the $185? She was quiet for a long time, sipping her iced tea. "Every day," she said finally. "And then I look at you, and I look at the work we're doing, and I think, no, this is better. The money would have bought their false love for a little while, but it would have been a lie. This," she said, gesturing to the foundation brochure on the table between us, to our home, to the easy silence between us, "this is the truth. You can't build a legacy on a lie, Amara, only on love that's real, even when it costs you everything you have." She reached over and squeezed my hand. Her skin was warm, her pulse steady. "And you, my brave girl, paid in full." We sat there as the stars emerged, pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. The past was a closed ledger. The future was a blank check. And for the first time in our lives, we both knew we were worth every single cent.